Hey everybody, welcome to Kent with Bent 138, the Kentomite maneuver, which is of course based on the Corbomite maneuver, one of the better episodes of the Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
I'm joined, of course, as is usual for Kent with Bent, Penn's the name, by Bent Hovind, no relation.
Hi everybody, I'm alright.
Good. So, let's see. We are here primarily to take a look at the nonsense claims of Kent Hovind. However, in doing so, we do have a little bit of a drinking game. So I will be explaining the rules. So the first rule is, of course, that we will take a drink whenever Kent Hovind says something that's so stupid, we just kind of have to cool our brains down. We will also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind says something that's actually factually accurate, but that comes out of his brain down to his vocal apparatus, and then we hear it, right? It can't be a quotation from something else. He can't just be reading out of a textbook. He actually has to have the true fact himself. We'll also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind tells a joke that doesn't land or tells a story that didn't happen. So, for instance, if he tells a story about how he totally owned this Berkeley professor on an airplane, but instead it sounds like he totally owned that shampoo bottle that he was having a pretend argument with in the shower, we'll take a drink for that. That one is a bit of a judgment call. But hey, if it sounds like it should be on r/that happened, we take a drink for it. We'll take a drink if Kent Hovind mentions that political party from Germany that was very prominent in the 1930s and 40s. We'll also take a drink if Kent Hovind mentions anything about Lucy, the Australopithecus afarensis, and mixes up what we can know about her genus or her species or tribe or family or whatever with what we can know just on the basis of those particular bones. So, for instance, if Kent says, well, we don't know what the foot bones of Australopithecus looked like, well, we have other specimens of Australopithecus that do preserve foot bones. So, yes, we do. So, no. So, let's see. We will also take a drink if Kent cites a source, and we check that source, and rather than just failing to support him, which they pretty much all do, it actively counters what he's saying. We'll take a drink for that. We'll also take a drink for a few things. One is, if you hear Godzilla or Mothra come by, we'll take a drink. Also, if any of you super chat or milestone chat anything that includes any of the member-only kaiju emojis, so that's Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, we'll take a drink for that. We'll also take a drink if anyone super chats anything to the effect that Answers in Genesis or AIG are a bag of dicks, because, well, I mean, they are. Also, more specifically, because for a while there, they were pretty big on the false copyright claims, which was a hassle not just to me, but to virtually everyone who ever covered them in any video, in any way. In fact, once they copyright struck a video of mine, in which part of their video was their own fair use of a Hollywood movie. Which was just great.
Oh, goodness.
Fair use for AIG, but not for me, is apparently the way that works. We'll also take a drink if anyone gifts memberships. So if you gift, you can gift 1, 5, 10. I think it then goes to 20 and then 50. I think. I'm not actually sure. But yeah, if you do that, we'll take one for each membership gifted up to once we have about 30 in the queue, I'm just going to hit 30 on there. Finish this particular beer. I'm drinking a Shock Top, by the way. And then I'll just go get another one. We're not sponsored. I am just reporting facts. Rosana Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $1.99 said AIG is a bag of blood blackened barbed hemipines. Alright, we'll take a drink for that. That's our first one for the night. And also, I have slightly modified the way that the funding tracker works. So before it was tracking all the way from 0 to 200% of the donations goal. But now it just goes to 0 to 100. But if we go past 100, it'll set back to 0 to 200. So we can keep track of when I might be able to get that tutu. You'll see how it goes. Dark Law Dragon, who's been a member for 23 months, is at the tetrapod level, sends, let's see, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, AIG is a bag of dicks, all in emojis, and the drink emoji. So we will, in fact, take a drink. All right. Bent. Not going to ask if you're ready, because no one is ever ready for Hovind.
No, I'm not ready.
But Are you likely to get more ready in the next 90 seconds?
No,
Okay. And that
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Exactly. That means it is about time to just go into it. Here we go. Kent was just telling us about how he had set up a $250,000 challenge with backing from other financial backers for anyone who could just demonstrate evidence for evolution. Of course, what that actually meant is Kent was asking for someone to prove that basically all 6 of his parts of evolutions, aspects of evolution, meanings of evolution, whatever he thinks, were all both absolutely true, and it was impossible for God to have done any of those things. Oh, yes, and if, I did forget, Dapper's a professional, Rosana Apophenia Sufferer Keller points out, you know what, we'll take a drink. If I screw up the production of the show, we take a drink. Now, that does not mean if something crashes or the internet cuts out, we take a drink, right? Because those are not my fault. If I make an error, if a computer makes an error, or an ISP makes an error, or YouTube makes an error, that's not me. And all of those things are things that are likely to happen, because I have a certain kind of luck.
Yeah.
I think that is about it. If there are any drinking triggers that I forgot, I'm sure I will remember them when we hit them, and we'll take a drink for them. Here we go.
You could offer any amount of evidence, any amount of money for the. There is no evidence. Nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog.
Which would be evidence against evolution. So we'll just start out with just that incredibly stupid statement and our first drink that's actually triggered by Kent.
He just doesn't understand evolution.
No. Triceratops Strawberry Polyploid Forever says Ben's drink is a lovely orange.
It is. It's very orange.
It looks like Tang.
It's an orange tangerine. It's orange tangerine.
So you're not an astronaut then.
And vitamin. I'm kind of up in space a little bit right now, I guess.
I think you're down in space.
Maybe.
Okay.
Let alone a dog come from a banana.
No one has ever suggested that a dog could come from a banana, Kent. No one. I'm just gonna. This is gonna be a small drink, but I'm gonna do it.
But if you can ever get the evolutionists to see clearly what it is they believe, and I've never had one admit this, but they do believe dogs and bananas have a common ancestor.
Ken, what do you mean you've never gotten anyone to admit that? That's just a basic part of evolutionary biology. I will explicitly say right now, all animals and all plants share a common ancestor. That ancestor was neither an animal nor a plant, but it was a living thing that existed. And that means that you, dear viewer, share a common ancestor with a banana. And so do I, even though I'm not even the same species as you, most likely. Unless there's a secret Ceratosaurus out there that I don't know about. If so, you should probably tell me, because I feel like Ceratosaurus should stick together. So, I don't know.
And there's strength in numbers.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Neotheropods strong together. There you go, right? It's like apes strong together, but with a different group of animals. And also, it doesn't include Dilophosaurus. No, it doesn't include Dilophosaurus. It doesn't include Coelophysis. Yeah. Get out of here, Coelophysis, you jerks. I don't actually have anything against Coelophysis.
And the ancestor was a rock.
No, that's the part that no one is going to admit to because no one believes it. Ken, here's the thing, right? If you have spent decades trying to get people who believe things that are not what you believe to admit to also believing something else, and then all of them tell you, no, I don't believe that, the reasonable conclusion is to think that you don't understand what they believe, right? And that's okay. It's okay to not know what people believe, and then to be informed about it, and then change your opinion on what they believe. We got Old Man Ryder, who's been a member for 4 months and is at the amniote level, and says, Kent's banana is a bag of AIG. Take a drink. So, for example, if, let's say, I don't know, you thought that, say, Muslims all believed in the resurrection of Jesus, which, by the way, they don't, right? Let's say you thought they believed that because you intuited that from their statement that they believe that Jesus is, in fact, the Jewish Messiah, which they do believe. Okay. And then literally every single Muslim tells you, nope, we don't think he died on the cross at all. We think that people were fooled into thinking he died on the cross, which is just in the Quran, right? Now, exactly how they were fooled, not in there. So that's a matter of speculation, and lots of Muslims disagree there. But if that's what the consistent conclusion of all the Muslims you talk to is, the correct thing to do would be to change what you think about the beliefs of Muslims. Similarly, if everyone who accepts evolution says to you, no, I don't think a rock is my ancestor, but you think they do, what is happening is that you just are getting it wrong. And that's okay. Just change. Of course, Kent won't. But Rosana Apophenia Sufferer for $4.99 says, I think someone should randomly quote from the Quran and assert that Kent believes the quote because he's a theist. I am down for that. That sounds like a good time. And then we just got 10 gifted memberships from Regios. And those went to people I'm not seeing. Why aren't they getting gifted out? There's people in the chat who don't have memberships. That's weird. Well, when they come in, I will read them out. Oh, here we go. There's one. Hayden Slinker, KPG Survivor, Pivots Kylo? I'm not really sure. I'm sorry about that. Sam Stutler, Kit, Fitzbraun, Corb B, Daniel Jackson, Kaylee P, That Weird Guy Matt, and I Cut Rocks. Everyone, if I mispronounce your name, 1, I can guarantee you it is not intentional, and 2, if you tag me with a correction, I will try to get it right and remember. However, there are hundreds of names who appear in chat, and I cannot remember all of them, but I will give it a go. All right, here we go. Here's 10 drinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Someone asked about Bilbo. Spud Byron. Bilbo only comes around, potentially, at about the half-hour mark. I give you guys some time before I potentially Bilbo you. You don't want to get Bilboed.
If you boil it down, that's what you get to.
Nope, it's not. It's not, because the things that life arose from, right? Like various ices, hydrocarbons, oxygen. These aren't things that are just rock, right? These are actually mostly ices in terms of astronomy. And they're not the kind of thing they're normally studied when I say geologists. So no. Unless, of course, you want to say that, like, Kent's ancestor is a cow because he eats beef, and therefore beef turns out to have provided some of the atoms that he is composed of. I mean, I don't think that's a reasonable thing to say, but if Kent wants to go there, then I guess I could say that in the same sense that Kent is descended from a cow, life is descended from a rock in some ways. Cadillac Rosie, who's been a member for 14 months and is at the Tetrapod level, says, my boxers is a version of AIG without the plural. Jeez. Alright, we'll take a drink. Al Trucker, who's been a member for 14 months, says, AIG B curated duffels fully gorged, steeped internally jellied, kippered, lushly moist neck organs, packed quartz, row sow trunks under valise, wit XYZZZ. I know that that's an AIG as a bag of dicks comment, but that was hard to read. I'll take a drink. Alright, here we go.
They don't see it. I think what's happened here, we have a Romans chapter 1 situation.
Oh, good.
They don't want to retain God in their knowledge.
And once again, this is not an argument between atheists and Christians. There are atheists who do not accept evolution. Fred Hoyle was a famous example. There are Christians who do accept evolution. Right? Like Francis Collins, former head of the National Institute for Health in the United States of America. Famously devout Christian, famously not a science denier. You can do both or neither. Yeah. The packaging of this as atheists versus Christians is just divisive rhetoric to engage in identity politics, where you say, we're the good guys, we're the Christians, we're the ones who do the right thing, we don't accept evolution, we don't like Pride Month. Happy Pride Month, everybody. We don't like all these things, right? And then in opposition, you set up a boogeyman. The atheists, they're the ones who don't believe in God. They believe in evolution. They do like Pride Month. They vote Democrat. We vote Republican. But when you actually get down to individual humans, they don't fall into those neat categories that Kent would like to pretend are all that exists. There are Christians who do like Pride Month and vote Democrat and don't say accept evolution. There are Christians who accept evolution and vote Republican, but are okay with Pride Month. There are atheists in all of those different camps too. Sorry that the world isn't as neat as Kent would like it. I mean, to be fair, I guess it's sorry for me too, since it would be easier for me if the world actually were in neat little boxes. Because then I could just pick a group and say, no, I don't like them. And it would be justifiable, because they would all fit into that nice, neat little box. But that's not how people work.
So God gave them up to vain imaginations. The Bible says God will send them strong delusion. You have to be deluded to think we came from a rock.
You know what? That's true. I'll take a drink. Good point, Kent. Kent makes a good point here.
Now, if you want to believe that, that's fine, but that's not logical, it's not scientific, and that's certainly not going to help you when you stand before God one day.
Look, if there's a final judgment, a la Christianity, I really, really don't think that God is going to stand people in front of him and say, okay, but where do you think your family tree goes back to if I go far back enough? You think it ever gets to a rock? I don't think that's going to be one of God's questions. I really don't. I think important questions are going to be the things like, that maybe Jesus talked about, like, did you help your neighbors? Did you give to the poor? Did you visit those in prison? Did you give aid and comfort to the ill? Did you help out orphans and the elderly and widows? Did you do those things? I think those are going to be more important questions. Because, I don't know, those are given as actual ethical principles in the New Testament by Jesus, which I feel like might be important if you're going to claim to be a follower of Jesus. But then again, I'm not here to tell you what your religion should be. Start Song for $5 says, Clint from Clint's Reptiles, who was featured on Whack an Atheist. Yes, he was, and it was weird because he is, in fact, not an atheist. Clint is a Mormon, which Kent probably wouldn't think of as Christian, but it's certainly not an atheist.
Some people are going to get before God and say, well, I studied the evidence and I believed in evolution. You had to want to believe that.
I wanted to not believe that. So did Bent.
I still want to not believe it.
Yeah. And yet, here we are.
It's true, though.
Right. Like,
Can't really not believe it.
Right. Oh, well. Here we go.
A logical thinking person won't come to that conclusion from studying the evidence.
Because Kent is the one logical thinking person.
Kent doesn't even know how to identify a skeleton as a dinosaur.
Apparently,
idea.
Apparently, I'm sounding woke. Okay. That's fine. I don't care. Woke doesn't mean anything. It just means whatever the right wing currently doesn't like.
When you look at a complex thing like a watch, I would come to the conclusion, somebody made this.
Now, Ben, I know you're not a watchmaker or an expert on watches, and you probably haven't even played The Lies of P.
Oh, I forgot about it.
Okay, but I think you know a little bit more about watches than I do, so I'm going to ask you this.
I mean, maybe I do.
Do watches produce other little baby watches that can then go on and produce further baby watches?
No, unlike evidence for evolution with watches, there's evidence. So.
Okay, so the watches can't do the whole evolution thing.
They're not evolution.
No, okay, so features in them can't have been the result of natural selection and mutation and drift.
And mutation, no.
Okay, alright.
No, that would make no sense.
I was unclear, because otherwise, like, if they could, then this would be a pretty good analogy, right? But since they can't...
Right, but it's not, because...
No.
Said, if you follow the evidence, watches are clearly designed. Evolution is clearly how biology works. Pretty obvious.
Rosen Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $4.99 says, Kent can't decide if, quote, came from a rock means born on planet Earth or a rock is your grandfather. He frequently switches it up. Oh yeah, there's no consistency with Kent. Or at least very little. I can't say there's no consistency. He's consistently dumb. That's a kind of consistency.
I don't know who he is. Doesn't matter. I don't know where he lives. I'll probably never meet him. I don't have to meet him. I believe he exists. Or at least did exist. I've seen what he did. The painting is proof of the painter.
Okay. I am again not a painter. But bets. Do paintings produce baby painting?
No.
Okay.
The object is proof of the designer.
No. God, no. Some objects are proof of their designer.
Even then, like, you have to, like I've seen video footage of watchmakers making one. Right? There's evidence. Right. No one's ever seen God create biology.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, certain objects that we've seen be designed, we can say with high confidence were designed. Also, things that don't reproduce, which means that they are not subject to evolution, which can produce the appearance of design. If those things have that appearance but can't reproduce in a way that allows for evolution, then we can have a good idea that they're probably designed in some way. Now, there are other things where we can say, well, we know that left to its own devices, nature doesn't tend to do this. For instance, if you were to say examine the carvings on Mount Rushmore to see if they're natural erosional features, one of the things you would see is that natural erosion features tend to have rocks break along natural cleavage plane, which you can detect by actually examining the rock. Whereas the breakages that form the faces on Mount Rushmore often go against natural cleavage planes, which is not something that natural erosion does. So we have an instance where we say, okay, well, we don't have a natural process that can do this. In fact, we only know non-natural processes that can do this. So we can infer design, even if we don't know who designed it, and even if we don't know anything about statuary. But we can't do that with life, right? We know a process that absolutely can produce at least the appearance of design. They also do reproduce, and we've never seen anyone design one. All right, we got a few super chats here. Love True Music 1 for $10 says, woke equals word created during Harlem Renaissance, meaning aware of injustice and politically active in fighting against it. If you're anti-woke, you actively support injustice. Hope that clears things up. Yes, I do know that that is the original definition of woke. However, the right wing has just decided that anything they don't like is woke. And they would probably argue that they themselves are woke according to that definition. It's why, famously, when a woman who wrote a whole book about how bad wokeness is was asked during an interview what woke means, she couldn't come up with an answer because she doesn't know what she means by it. Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $4.99 says, some paintings produce baby paintings when exposed to rain.
Yeah.
I don't think that's entirely what we were talking about, but yeah, that's true. Thank you. All right, here we go.
That's all you need. I could probably analyze a few things about, I could tell you a few things about the guy that made this watch. Even though I don't know, never met him, probably never will. Probably speaks Japanese, lives in Japan apparently.
Actually, it's probably true, but Japan hires plenty of foreigners for various design projects and stuff. Yeah, basically, it's one of the only ways to move to Japan is actually to be hired by a Japanese company. It's not easy to move to Japan. You can do it, though. You can also do it by signing up to teach English. That can do it.
I would say he's a logical thinker.
At least during the design process. One of the things is people can be really highly analytical and logical in some areas, and then be completely irrational in other areas. And you can actually see that with a lot of creationists, right? Like we've got, what's his name? Jonathan Sarfati, right? This dude is a chess master. I have seen him do multiple simultaneous blindfolded chess matches and win every single one of them. You cannot tell me that that guy isn't a highly logical chess player who can think many moves ahead, who can remember multiple board positions across multiple games. Like, it's frankly amazing that anyone can do it, and he's one of those people who can do it. It's very impressive. However, Jonathan Sarfati also doesn't ever seem to have looked at a bird pelvis despite pontificating about them. He is incredibly stupid when he needs to be in order to support his creationist nonsense. Incredibly stupid, to the point of dishonesty. And yet, there he is, doing amazing feats in chess that I could never do. So what do we do with that? Well, clearly, sometimes he can think very clearly. Other times, he either chooses to or can't.
He's got the numbers in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. He must think logically.
Doesn't it go to 12 and there's no 0 on the clock face? Is this a weird clock? Is this a new kind of clock that Kent has?
I could probably deduce a few character traits. He must be patient, able to put them little bitty things on there.
The designer is usually not the one who assembles the clock, Kent. This is not like 1742. What are you talking about?
Must be precise. Must be very smart. He must have a good knowledge of electronics. How must have a good knowledge of different materials. He knows certain plastics can be used certain places, but they couldn't be used other places. You wouldn't want to use plastic in the watch band. How long would that last?
I mean, you can absolutely use plastic in the watch band as long as it's got stretchy stuff between it. I've had plastic banded watches. I mean, it's fine. It's fine.
You can use it for the buttons. He has a knowledge of quite a few things. A knowledge of materials. Never met the guy, but I can already tell you a few things about him.
Okay.
I've never met God, but I can tell you a few things about him. He's real smart. He's patient. He's loving.
All right, well, this has stopped actually being claims. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to switch videos.
Ooh.
We have a new video.
Ooh.
This is, let's see, CSE 103 Class 2. You still see it, Bent?
Yes.
Awesome. Real quick, Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $1.99 says, Kent doesn't know how to read a watch. Oh,
It's probably true.
wait, no, I just realized something. I was thinking that his watch was actually like a watch face, you know, like with 1 through 12. I think it's a digital watch. I think that's why he's saying like the numbers go from like 1 through 9 to 0 and then back.
Oh,
Because
okay.
like on the second hand and the minute hand, you're actually going to see that happening. So, okay. And hey, look, you know what? No shade on digital watches. If you want a digital watch, go for it. I don't know that he can actually read a watch, though, so that's the other thing. Ken seems like the kind of person who might, when presented with a watch face with hands, be unable to read that. A skill that he should have picked up in, like, what, like third or fourth grade or something like that?
I think before you go to school.
Really?
Yeah.
I seem to remember having, like, how to read a clock in school.
I don't
Maybe
know.
I'm wrong about that. Hey, if anyone out there is a teacher and you know about what age kids learn to read clock faces, let me know, because I don't actually know.
Okay, by now you should have taken your quiz on...
Oh, crap, I didn't take the quiz.
Let's say the same
Oh,
thing.
man. Ben, can I copy your question or your answers?
Sure.
Awesome.
I just put C for everything. I got 100%.
Interesting. Actually, I do know of a professor who did that on one of his exams. The right answer was just C the whole way down. And he did it to, like, psych out the people who were like, wait, it can't just all be C. That's impossible. And, like, yeah, no, the answers were all C. It was a multiple choice test. The right answer was always C.
the previous lesson we had last week. We're going to start continuing talking about lies in the textbooks, things that have been proven wrong a long time ago that are still taught to the kids every week all across the world. It's not just America.
Garsong says 24-hour time goes from 0 to 23. Yes, I was in the military. However, I can't imagine that Kent has a 24-hour hand clock. Or, like, with a clock face on his... Like, that just doesn't happen in America. I don't think I've ever seen an American with a watch that has a 24-hour clock on it. That's,
Not an analog watch.
I don't even normally see it on digital watches. Like, I know a lot of digital watches you can switch it to 24-hour time, but, like, Americans who aren't in the military very rarely use 24-hour time.
Well, I know someone who does it now. They were in the military.
Yeah, okay. But, like, if you don't have any military experience and you're an American, the chances of you using the 24-hour clock are basically nil. I've had people who never had military experience, and I've tried to explain 24-hour time to them several times over, and they just like, no, I don't really get it. There's nothing to get.
Yeah, there's nothing to get. It's not complicated.
Oh, I just
You
screwed
just have to
that
be a
up.
little man.
We'll take a drink for Dapper's Professional, and then we'll read this super chat. So, Rosina Apophenia, Sufferer Keller for $1.99 says, my watch is a $99 plastic band watch. Or plastic watch band. Yeah, exactly. Right, it does happen. It's a real thing, Kent.
I collect textbooks. I've got them from other countries, and every time I go, I've been to 26 countries, I look in their textbooks, they still teach the same things.
I mean, just things that are true?
They teach science.
Yeah,
Wow.
Science? Okay.
Shocking.
This is a universal problem, or at least a worldwide problem. They're teaching the kids the whole...
That's the thing, Kent. It's not a problem.
Yeah. But
Problem
also,
to you because you don't understand.
I also liked how he's like, well, it's a universal. Well, it's a worldwide problem. Because, like, on Mars, the textbooks on Mars, they don't have this problem. The Martians are good Christians, you see. All right, for 500 Argentinian pesos, thank you so much. Dapper's Pelagic PhD says, creationist professor of... I can't talk. Creationist professor of mine wanted to talk about Kentrosaurus, but got confused and showed pictures of Centrosaurus. Oof. He said paleontologists say this is a hadrosaur, but I think it's a ceratopsia. Kentrosaurus wasn't a hadrosaur either. No, it wasn't. It was a stegosaur. Oh, that's amazing. That is... Oh, man. That's great.
Horse used to have 4 toes, and it slowly evolved into a one-toed horse.
Well, I mean, it's not like it was an orthogenetic thing where, like, the entire lineage of Equidae was losing toes the entire time. Like, there was movement back and forth. And it does so happen that the lineage that survived was one of the lineages where the trend tended towards digit reduction the whole way through. But that's not like it was the only option that was there for horses. Also not the only time single-toed ungulates have evolved. There was also a group of single-toed ungulates that were notoungulates from South America, but they went extinct shortly after the land bridge between North and South America formed. So, you know, humans probably never saw any.
This whole story was made up in 1874. Let's review a couple of dates here. Back in...
I don't know why these dates are important. Like, if it had been, quote-unquote, made up in 1762 or 1939, like, would it make a difference? Does it matter? It's a weird thing. Kent always picks weird things to focus on, in my opinion, at least.
1859, Darwin's book was written. 1859.
Hey.
Darwin predicted, we will find evidence for my theory. The theory, of course, says that all life forms have a common ancestor. He said this in 1859, and most scientists at this time rejected it. They said, this is a stupid idea, this is a dumb theory.
I mean, most scientists always reject a new theory. It takes a while for the evidence to come in, but okay.
A few preachers, liberal preachers, who at the same time, there was quite a bit of discussion going on about the accuracy of the Bible, and especially in Germany, they were called the higher critics. They were saying, well, the Bible can't be true because, you know, we know the earth is millions of years old.
No, that's not what higher critics were doing. Jeez, I'm going to take a drink. Higher critics didn't have anything to do with geology, Kent. So higher criticism is something that arrives out of a careful study of biblical texts, originally almost exclusively by Christian historians and archaeologists. And the idea was that, okay, we've got this Bible. Let's go find corroboration in the texts of other civilizations, in archaeology, internal aspects of the text. Let's and carefully examine the Bible on both its own terms and on the terms of what else we know from the times that it talks about. And originally, this was set up as more or less an apologetics pursuit, right? Like, we know the Bible is true the way we think of it as being true. We think that these bits are historical. Let's go get the evidence for that. And then it turns out they consistently failed in many cases. They discovered things about the text that lent towards the idea that the traditional ideas of, say, authorship or date of composition weren't actually true. For instance, they discovered that, say, oh, hey, it looks like some of these Pauline epistles may not have had the same author. They don't use the same kind of vocabulary. They use different grammatical constructions. They seem to be referencing events that were long after the likely death of Paul. So I guess maybe not all of these Pauline epistles were actually by Paul. Similarly, they were looking into things like the authorship of the Pentateuch, and noticing that, sometimes the Pentateuch seems to tell the same story twice in a row in contradictory ways, and it's not always clear exactly what happens. Like, hey, who sold Joseph to Potiphar? Not actually clear, because at one point, some, I think it's Midianites, I don't remember exactly, grab Joseph out of that pit he's in, and they sell him. But then later on in the narrative, his brothers come back, and they then sell him to a caravan who brings him to Egypt. It's like, how does that work? And then from there, the higher critics went on to go and try to examine the Bible as literature and find out what we can say about it with a high degree of confidence from a historical standpoint. They didn't care about geology because, quite frankly, none of that stuff is geologically relevant, because no matter who's right, the Bible isn't really old enough for geology to be a big deal for higher criticism. The only exception might be the flood. But even then, since they're not geologists anyway, probably wouldn't know what to look for in terms of flood evidence. Now, Carrie Bronson, who's been a member for 37 months and is at the annual level, says, why did it take Satan 1,850 years to put together his book of God-defying secularism to unsave us? Does Ken think it would take that long for him? Actually, Ken thinks that evolution goes all the way back to, the Tower of Babel, and that different versions of evolution have been created to adapt them to the thoughts of that, and ideas prominent at that time. So Kent thinks that there was, an evolution for the Bronze Age, and then it morphed somewhat in, when talking about, late Bronze Age, early Iron Age, Greek philosophers. And then there was a different kind of evolution that was going on in, the medieval and early modern periods until Darwin. And then Darwin, we come up with a different version of evolution. And that it's always changing to meet the needs of the time, to fool as many people and bring them away from Christ. Of course, the fact that, as far as I can tell, this has generally not been effective means at bringing people away from Christianity. I don't know why, especially since the earliest forms, back in, the Tower of Babel days, there were no Christians. I don't know how it could have led them away from Christianity. I guess you could say, maybe it led them away from monotheism, maybe, I guess. Except, historically, there weren't monotheists there either. But, whatever. And yeah, that's true. He does seem to think that evolution in some way goes back to the Garden of Eden, because he thinks that the serpent telling Eve that if she eats from the fruit, she will be like God, is itself somehow an evolutionary thing, because she'll evolve to become God, because evolution is about getting better, which it's not really. But he thinks that that's an evolutionary thing, which, by the way, I want to point out that later on in the narrative, the reason that God gives for kicking Adam and Eve out is that they have become like us, meaning him and his divine counsel, meaning that the snake wasn't wrong about that. Eating the fruit did make Adam and Eve like God, according to, in the narrative, God, who then wanted to kick them out so that they wouldn't eat from the tree of life, which would then make them immortal, making them even more like God. So, I don't know how that's supposed to be an evil lie that's from evolution when it's just what happens in the story. Rusna Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $4.99 says, does Kent count animal husbandry as pre-Darwin evolution? No, I don't think so. He seems to know about animal husbandry and not think of it as on its own problematic or evolutionary. Here we go.
And so they're really attacking the Bible on all sides from during the mid-1800s. The higher critics were. So Darwin's book came out and said all life forms have a common ancestor. They said, and Darwin said in his book, we should find out.
Actually, the origin of species says one or a few, but it's a nitpicky point. I'm not going to belabor.
Evidence for my theory. Over the next 15 or 20 years, a lot of people began to manufacture evidence. What's one of the ones we talked about in the last class about one of the things they document, or they in the last CSE 102?
Is it going to be Piltdown Man? If it's Piltdown Man, we drink.
Things 1869, a professor made up some evidence and was later proven wrong. Who remembers that one? He said, we can prove all animals.
If no one knows, you're going to have to just give them the damn answer. This is one of the things I hate with professors and teachers. If no one is making any motion to answer your question, it means no one knows. Just answer the question. You staring at a bunch of people and continuing to ask them a question that they already don't know the answer to isn't going to make them somehow magically have known the answer the whole time. I really hate it when professors and teachers do that crap. It's like, yeah, no one knows. Just answer the question. Sorry, it's a pet peeve of mine. I don't know why it annoys me so much. It just really does.
Well, just me too.
Have a common ancestor because as they're developing inside the mother, they have gill slits.
Oh, he's going on Haeckel. Okay. Yeah, so here's the thing about Haeckel, which means we don't get to drink for Piltdown Man. So Haeckel wasn't faking anything. However, what he was doing would not meet modern standards, right? Because now we have access to things like photographs and, microscopes. And I will say, I do think it was inappropriate, even for the time, for him to make some of his sketches without reference. The thing was, he was not publishing this as a peer-reviewed scientific paper. He admitted to what he was doing, and he was still largely accurate. His drawings were not inaccurate. In fact, the paper that was accusing Haeckel of fraud, that was published, I believe, in like the 1990s, was later followed up by the same authors with another paper that essentially retracted their original claims of fraud and realized there was a number of parts of their analysis that they originally did that were in error, and when they fixed those, it turns out that there was no evidence of fraud. Also, Ken is fond of saying that there was a fraud trial for Haeckel, and there is no transcript of any fraud trial or anything like that having gone on at the university. A university, which, by the way, keeps records of their own internal disciplinary matters, as is typical for universities. So, if there had been such a thing, there probably should be a record, but there isn't. So, the most likely thing to say is that there just was no fraud trial. Can I prove that there wasn't a fraud trial as a matter of the historical record? No. It is, I guess, possible there was a fraud trial that had its records destroyed and that no one has heard of until like the 20th century. I can't say that that's impossible. But can you see why I think that that's not, the most likely outcome here? Yeah. That's some Russell's Teapot kind of historiography going on there. Yo, Vishanti, welcome to the chat.
Ernst Haeckel, correct. Made that up in 1869. 1874, it was proven wrong.
Nope. So here's what was proven wrong from Haeckel, right? Haeckel believed in what's called recapitulation, which means that he thought that during embryology, the embryo went through the adult stages of its evolutionary ancestors. So at one point, the embryo of the human essentially was an adult fish. At another point, it essentially was an adult amphibian and then an adult reptile. And that's not true. For $5, Love True Music 1 says, last semester, one professor who couldn't clearly delineate rhetorical questions versus questions she actually wanted... I messed that up. Last semester, one professor wouldn't clearly delineate rhetorical versus questions she actually wanted a response for. There you go. Awkward silences galore, and Zoom not... no help. Yeah, I imagine that Zoom would make that far, far worse. Yeah, that's going to be really annoying. I'm sorry. That sucks. But, hey, we got to put another... Here we go. See the number. It goes up. I like that.
Thanks.
I like seeing the number go up.
Mm.
I also like that I no longer have to do the math because I told Blender to do all the math for me. Yeah, that's always good. Also, I found out that the number of gifts and memberships we need to get to the 2-2 on just memberships alone, 69.
Nice.
Yeah.
Still in textbooks today, used in our county.
I mean, look, I can't guarantee that. What's probably happening, because most of the textbooks I've seen that I've used or been issued or whatever They actually use photographs of the embryos to make the same point. That is still true, because embryology still provides strong and compelling evidence for evolution. However, if there is still a textbook out there actually using drawings from, the 1960s and 70s, the 1860s and 70s, then yeah, no, they should stop. We have photographs now. Use photographs.
Mhm.
Heather Cursorial Angiosperms Coon for $4.99 says, I've never been in the military and I've used 24-hour mode on my watch for years. Okay, I used to be an EMS responder and they use 24-hour time. Okay. Perhaps the more technically accurate thing to say would be that unless you use 24-hour time as a professional standard in your profession, then as an American, you're probably not using 24-hour time. So I guess that cops, EMS, firefighters, military, of course, a lot of people in those professions those professions themselves that aren't military are themselves veterans, though. I guess that kind of makes sense. There's a lot of overlap there. For $4.99, Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller says, the fraud trial amounted to other staff members being against Ernst Haeckel's entire radical for the time idea of common embryonic development. Yeah. I mean, he certainly wasn't an uncontroversial figure. Pressure the Croxagore for $2 says, speaking of, what's your favorite local reptile? Ooh, oh, that is a really good question. So I really do like the whiptail lizards. I think they're really neat. I mean, can I say Roadrunner? Does Roadrunner count? I mean, it's a reptile, right? But I feel like picking a bird is like cheating. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm not sure.
I don't have a favorite. I know.
Wait, you don't?
I know.
Okay, so let's see. But I also like the Western banded gecko. This is the zebra-tailed lizard's really cool too. Jeez, why do y'all gotta ask me such a hard question? My favorite reptile. I can tell you what it's not, and it's white-winged doves. Those things they get on my nerves. They're way too loud. Yeah, I don't know. So I guess I've given you a few options: Roadrunner, and zebra-tailed lizard, whip-tailed lizard. I mean, chuckwallas are cool. So are collared lizard. Jeez. There's rattlesnakes. They're really cool. I don't know. I like all the reptiles around here. The Gila monster lives around here. It's the biggest North American lizard. You know? There's red-tailed hawks. I've given you a few options. I like all of those. Okay, and then Rail Gatubello for $2 sends in Hebrew, which is AIG is a bag of dicks. And I'm not going to try and read it in Hebrew because holy crap is my Hebrew bad. I got excited once when I managed to read like 2 words in a row of Hebrew without needing to look them up. That was like the highest level of my Hebrew. I was like, oh wow. Lunar Regolith Phantasmal Terrain says, sounds like Dapper needs to make a trip up to Clint's reptile room. I mean, that would be cool. Although I assume that when asking like what my favorite local reptile is, it means like it's native to the area. Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller says, under monophyly, are humans reptiles? No. So, reptilia is largely synonymous with the clade Sauropsida, which does not include synapsids. So, yeah, basically, diapsids plus a few allies is what Sauropsida is. And you can largely just say that that's what reptilia is. Reptilia is really kind of a silly legacy taxon that doesn't really mean anything anymore. But if you just identify it as Sauropsida, then you're not going to go wrong. And it means that humans are not reptiles. Neither is Dimetrodon, right? Or a Dilophosaurus. So. All right. Let's hit play.
All over the world, they're still using this, even though it's been proven wrong since 126 years ago. 1874 also, a guy named Othniel Marsh. What a first name, huh? That's a Bible name. N-I-E-L. Othniel C. Marsh.
The C stands for Charles.
He was a fossil hunter, I believe.
Kent is right. He was a fossil hunter. Only possibly, like, tied for third most famous fossil hunter ever with Edward Drinker Cope. The other one, and they hated each other. And they, in fact, occasionally dynamited each other's dig sites to ruin what they were digging for because they were in a competition. We're drinking, by the way. Here's a drink. In what was called the Bone Wars. And in fact, between the two of them, as far as I know, they are still responsible for the generic names of the majority of Mesozoic dinosaurs known from North America, across the United States and Canada. They were all over the place, trying to dig up dinosaurs and name dinosaurs, and they were in a competition, and it would be rushing to publish. And in fact, for that reason, sometimes some of their discoveries were a little overlooked in the the hustle to get all these papers, which is one of the reasons that Tyrannosaurus is actually not Tyrannosaurus according to the original rules for taxonomy. In fact, they added a new rule just for Tyrannosaurus that if no one had used a different name for a taxon for I think it was like 50 years or longer, despite there being a senior synonym for that taxon, then that junior synonym could become the official name. And it was specifically designed because Tyrannosaurus had just kind of inched over that threshold as someone discovered there was an earlier name for the same genus. And they didn't want to change the name of Tyrannosaurus and then have an entire several half century worth of papers be using the wrong nomenclature. And also have to change all the displays and inform all the people who were big fans of Tyrannosaurus no, I'm sorry, it's not no. No. We're just sticking with Tyrannosaurus. Anyway, here we go.
Made money hunting dinosaur fossils and stuff like that and digging them out and setting them up in museums. They would buy them off it. Othniel Marsh picked animal skeletons that he had found, or that other people had found, picked them from all over the world, and put them together in a series.
By all over the world, Kent primarily means North America. Because remember, Othniel Marsh was an American paleontologist. He didn't actually do a whole lot of work in Europe. And in fact, virtually all fossil equids occur in North America until the very latest ones. There are some exceptions. There are a few European equids, but the big reason why equids really are a big thing in North America and less so anywhere else is for the simple reason that North America is where equids evolve. There you go.
I believe it was for Harvard, and they still have it on display at Peabody Museum. I believe that's the one that got his original one. But he found a little bitty animal about the size of a fox, and then he found a slightly bigger animal, and a bigger one, and a bigger one, all the way up to a horse. He arranged them in this order you see in your textbooks, from the Hyracotherum up through the...
Ooh.
Hey, I think I'm back connected to YouTube. I don't know why.
Yay.
But my connection to YouTube just went to 0. I'm sorry. I don't know why that happened. Yeah, fear traumatic insemination monger, you're not the only one who had the buffering. My connection just dropped to 0. I don't know why. I also don't know how much you heard, so I'll just say some stuff again. First of all, though, for $4.99, Rosa Apophenia for Keller says, but there are no native horses in North America now. That is correct. They went extinct in North America after having spread to Eurasia across the Bering Land Bridge. Yep, that actually happened to a number of organisms. Horses, camels, happened a few times. So yeah, camels were another thing that evolved in the Americas, and then they went extinct in North America. They hung on in South America, and then the North American groups migrated into Eurasia over the Bering Land Bridge, went extinct in North America, and then spread all over in Eurasia. So, yep. Horses did not return to North America until a Spanish shipwreck washed some ashore over around California or so, and they went feral and quickly spread across North America as a feral population. And so those horses that, say, American colonizers moving west during the Manifest Destiny western expansion of the United States, when they were encountering Native Americans that were, living on the plains and hunting buffalo from horseback, those horses were in fact descended from, by and large, from those original Spanish horses. And they were only a fairly recent addition to the culture of those plains people. Before that, they had been hunting on foot because there were no riding animals in North America. DM Original In Situ Academic Excavation Wing for $2 says, I've never heard of the Hierasso theorem. With some turtles and some pride flags. Happy Pride. Yeah, that's because Hierasso theorem isn't a thing. It's Hyracotherium. And here's the thing. I think this got cut off by the buffering. I don't normally go after people for mispronouncing paleontology terms like Hyracotherium or Mesohippus or Equus or whatever. I guess Equus is pretty simple, but either way. And that's the reason for that is because, like, look, you're not an expert. It doesn't really matter that much if you mispronounce Hyracotherium. No. However, if you're going to purport to be an expert on paleontology and science broadly, to the point that you're going to overturn the scientific consensus in virtually all fields of science, you damn better be able to pronounce Hyracotherium. Let's see. My Unfinished Journey for $5 says, Dapper was no longer on the edge of 17, just like the white-winged dove sings a song. Sounds she's singing, ooh, ooh, ooh. Sorry, I didn't sing that, but you don't want me to. Look, I've said a few times that I was in a choir, but here's the secret. I was singing as a tenor. You know what the tenors have to do? It's like hold a note, and then halfway through the song, switch to a different note that they hold for the next quarter of the song, and then switch back to the original note.
Nice.
That's how tenors sing the songs in choir. It's barely singing. Can you stay in pitch for one note for the next 2.5 minutes? Okay, good. You can be the tenor. Oh,
nice.
Different kinds of horse-like animals up to the modern horse called Equus. He put the animals in this order, never did find them in that order.
What would it mean for him to find them in that order? Like, does that mean that the first one he found chronologically would have been, like, Hyracotherium? And then, like, a few years later, he found Mesohippus? Does Kent mean that he didn't find them at, like, increasing heights in the stratigraphic column? What do you mean, Kent? Because they absolutely are younger, going from left to right. Now, there's overlap, but that's something that we expect with evolution. So I don't know what you mean by in that order. Do you think that he should have found them, like, horizontally in order, like they were marching in lockstep before they got buried? Like, what do you mean, Kent? That's the thing. I don't know what he means. But you know what, though?
He probably doesn't know what he means.
No, probably not. But it is about time for a quick break so that we can get fresh drinks and that y'all can also have some commercials played because I need money. So, there it is. All right, everybody, we will see you on the other side of the break. It'll be just a few minutes. Have fun. We will be listening to the musical stylings of Beethoven after the commercials, of course. And we are back. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for sticking with me. Those of you who did. Let's see. We have a $4.99 super chat from Rosana Apophenia Sufferer Keller that says, it's like the various swords in Zelda games. You need to find them in order if you aren't using glitches. Yes. Equus is... Equus is like the tempered master sword. And if you find the tempered master sword before you can get to Mary Kippus, the master sword, then you did it wrong. You should go back. Evolution disproved. Alright, so before we get back into it, I'm going to give my usual at the middle of the break thing, which is to say that this channel really can't keep going without the support of my viewers, and you guys have so far been amazing in your support. I've been able to do this full-time for a few years now, which if you had told me that I was going to be doing that ever, even just like the year I started, I would have said, no, probably not. That doesn't seem likely. And yet here we are. So far, it's being sustainable. But it won't stay sustainable unless people opt to support. Because sometimes people drop out, you know? We've had a few cancellations here and there, and that's okay. But it does mean that, you know, I do need to still ask people to help out. And so if you are currently not supporting the channel financially, but you are interested in doing so, and you can afford it, that's an important part. If you can't afford it, please don't do it. But if you are interested and you can afford it, there are a few great ways to support the channel. The first one is Patreon, where I get to keep the most of the money. Why I always bring it up first. It's linked in the description. Bent also has a Patreon link in the description. On my Patreon, you get access to the videos that are scripted early, where right now somewhere around 5 months early is pretty typical for the videos. Which is a lot. I don't know very many channels who are 5 months worth of early access to videos. It's a little crazy. You also get access to a Discord server that's just for people who are supporting. That's one of the ways that's easiest to get a hold of me. There's also the channel memberships. Right below this video, there should be a join button. That gives you the same early access, the same access to the Discord server. It also gives you your name in green, the cool little badge next to your name, and access to the channel emojis. Either way, you're going to be paying a monthly thing for the Patreon. It starts at $1 a month. The $1.99 is the minimum for the channel membership. You can, of course, go for both if you want. The Patreon also has a 15% discount if you join and opt to pay annually instead of monthly. There is no annual option here on YouTube. But that's still a 15% discount. That's more than 2 free months, basically. There are also higher tiers where you get more perks. You can get your name in the credits. I'll say your name. I'll actually thank you personally. There's further perks that you can get. Although people often don't take me up on the higher perks, which is okay. You don't have to. That's another thing. You don't have to take me up on any perks. I've had someone who, for a while, was on a fairly high tier who just didn't want to be acknowledged. And I said, okay, I just won't acknowledge you. That's fine. There's also, if a monthly or an annual subscription isn't your thing, there's a few other options. There's a merch store linked in the description. There's also a merch store. There's a merch shelf. If you don't like anything on the merch shelf, you can always click on it. It'll just bring you to the full store, and then you can just, you know, get whatever's on there. Hopefully tomorrow, if I remember, remind me, everyone, I will get a new design up on the store. I have a KJV get title design just standing by on my hard drive.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So remind me, and I'll try to make sure I get that up there. Yeah, and so if that's still not your speed, there's also an Amazon wishlist. There's one for both me and Bent. I know on Bent there's a lot of stuff that's like various snacks and breakfast foods and stuff like that. Mine has a lot. Nice. Mine has a few snacks on there. It's also got books. A lot of them are RPG books because I don't know if you guys know this, but I like to collect TTRPG books, even for games I don't plan on playing, because I also like to rifle through them for rules that I can hack into other games. And yeah, if none of that's right for you, that's fine. Please just hit like, subscribe to the channel, share these videos, and watch a few in a row. And that goes even if you are pledging. It really helps the channel grow. All right, Rosen Apophenia Sufferer Keller says test, and then tries to send 3 AIG as a bag of dicks emojis, but they only came through as plain text, which I don't think is what you were trying to do. Carrie Bronson for $5 says, ironically, we did find the specimens arranged like the trot of equine progress. Ironically, if we did find the specimens arranged like the trot of equine progress, it would disprove evolution. Yeah, it would certainly go at least a very long way towards disproving evolution, if not outright just completely blowing it out of the water. That's accurate. All right, here we go.
It's like finding an animal here, an animal on some other continent, and saying, wow, this one evolved into this one.
Oh wait, we'll drink for the AIG test, even if it didn't pass. It's Starsum, who's been a member for 1 month, is at the tetrapod level, says, a bag of... And then we get a little penis emoticon. Is an AIG. Thank you very much, I'll take a drink. Oh, Zimor42 said that you just joined the Patreon for $5 a month, and you've also been a member for 8 months at the tetrapod level. Thank you so much. That really does mean a lot to me. You might think like, oh, my $1 or $5 doesn't matter that much. It does, because it all adds up. If all my $5 and $1 patrons left Patreon, it would leave a significant hole in the budget. So, it really matters. So thank you so much.
Did not find him in that order. Did not even find him in the same place.
Why would they all be in the same place? Do you think that the only way for evolution to be true is if literally you and all your ancestors die on top of each other? Like Kent's...
No one ever moves.
Kent's about to... It's the big one. He can feel it. He's like, oh no, I have to get back to Norway to lay on top of the graves of my ancestors so that people know who I'm descended from. He has to like take a quick flight off to the land of his forefathers to go die on top of their grave. Like, what are you talking about, Kent? Animals move around. Like, you currently think that coyotes and wolves and foxes probably had a common ancestor. But I don't know if you know this. I live in a place that has that has coyotes, but doesn't have wolves. And I can also go to places like Alaska that has wolves and doesn't have coyotes. Does this mean these things don't share a common ancestor? No, of course not. The polar bear is so closely related to the brown bear that they can still produce fertile hybrids. Does that mean that they live in the same places? I mean, in a few spots in their range they do. Like in, southern Canada and southern Alaska, there are places where they overlap. But by and large, no. You can find brown bears in places like, like Washington, the state, not the city. And, you can find polar bears over by Barrow, Alaska. You think there's too many grizzly bears over in Barrow? No. You think there's a whole bunch of polar bears hanging out in, Washington state? Also, no. What? Of course they're found in different places. There is absolutely no reason to think that all of the organisms that form a lineage in evolution, closely related organisms that show transition over time, would all live in the same geographical spot. In fact, in order for you to find them in that way, you would have to have continuous deposition throughout the entire time of that evolutionary sequence. Very few places have continuous deposition for that much time. Usually you're going to get an unconformity somewhere. I hate this. I hate how badly Kent understands the basics of evolution.
He just arbitrarily arranged this order out of his imagination.
No, it's still a mostly chronological order, Kent. Fade to Gray, our worldview comrade, for $5 says, the most troubling implication of evolution is that I'm related to Kent Hovind. Yeah, you know what? Amen to that. Which is weird, because amen means let it be so, which is not really what I mean when I say amen to that. Weird. You know what? Words change meaning. It's okay. Rosna Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $4.99 says, it's called a, quote, tell when the dead pile up on the dead, like Paris. Yeah, I mean, there are places where things like that happen, right? It's just not a requirement. But yeah, there are traditional burial grounds. Although I don't think that too many horses have traditional burial grounds like the catacombs of Paris or something. So yeah. All right, here we go. Let's hit play.
That is still being taught in textbooks today.
Yeah, because it's still broadly true, Kent. Now, like I said, look, there is overlap, right, between the time frames of these organisms. But multiple analyses of their relationship between them have indicated that they all fit into a fairly neat and pretty predictable nested hierarchy, and that, by and large, they do follow from most basal to most arrived, with most basal being Hyracotherium, all the way to the most derived in Equus and other latest genera of horses. And here's the other thing. It's so obvious that Answers in Genesis has now largely accepted horse evolution from at least three-toed horses. Because on the Ark, you don't find members of genus Equus. There are no zebras or horses or donkeys on the Ark at the Ark encounter. What's there is Mesohippus, a three-toed, small, like, size of like a small to medium-sized dog animal. Answers in Genesis has decided that, you know what, they can't keep arguing against the obviousness of the horse sequence, and they're just going to take it. For them, the ancestor of the horses that we see today, that was on the Ark, is Mesohippus. But even the other creationists know that Kent doesn't have a leg to stand on this, or doesn't have a toe to stand on, since we're talking about horses.
Ooh.
Yeah, take a look at that. Yeah, I know about horse anatomy. Like I know what a cannon is. You know horses have cannons?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well they do.
As evidence for evolution. What he did not tell the folks, and I think they should have,
They have withers too.
is that this is not scientific. This is just pure theoretical, that we have this belief.
What part of it do you think is just theoretical, Ken? Because the fossils exist. The analysis of the fossils that is so compelling that even most creationists accept it. That's still a thing. They still come in the ground in roughly chronological order in the way that you would expect if this is in fact an evolutionary sequence. Now, it is true that it's not orthogenetic, and we have groups of later horses, and by horses I just mean members of family Equidae, that are retaining the three-toed condition after other groups have evolved to reduce those two side toes down even more and are now only walking on the one toe. Like, we do have persistence of more basal foot morphologies, and we have sizes going up and down all over the place. That's true. So I will grant you that the four picked horses that we typically see when we're projecting this as like an evolutionary sequence, they are somewhat cherry-picked. And it is, in fact, misleading to say that this is just the sequence of horse evolution. Just like the march of progress when it comes to humans is misleading, right? It's not actually what was happening on the ground. There was a whole bunch of diversification into different directions, and it's only if you pick just the ones that are closest to the exact human lineage that you can really create this kind of march of progress. The same is true for horses, but still fundamentally, like, was evolved from something that probably wasn't Mesohippus, but looked a whole lot like Mesohippus, which evolved from something that probably wasn't Merychippus, but looked a whole lot like Merychippus, which evolved from something that probably wasn't Hyracotherium, but it sure would have looked like Hyracotherium. So there's nothing in here that's a lie or proven wrong. Unless, of course, you just want to be very specific about the orthogenetic presentation of the sequence, in which case, yeah, sure, I'll agree with you. That's inappropriate.
It's interesting to note, the so-called ancient horse it's a meat-eating animal, has
Nope. Just take a drink. It is, in fact, a grazer. In fact, one of the only ways to tell the earliest horses from the earliest rhinos apart is by looking at their molars. Because rhinos have grazing, higher cups molars for crunching through woody stems, and horses have flatter, grinding molars for chomping up grasses into a pulp. A difference in diet which persists to this day, because primarily rhinos are still grazers who eat things like shrubs and bushes, and horses are still grazers who primarily eat grass. Now, it's not to say that you'll never see a rhino eating grass or a horse nipping some leaves off of a bush or something, right? But their primary diet, grass for horses, shrubs and bushes for rhinos. Rosina Apophenia Sucker Keller for $1.99 says, thick equistone. Well, at least we're not talking about camelid foot anatomy.
sharp teeth, where horses do not have sharp teeth.
Horses absolutely have sharp teeth. Kent, have you ever been bitten by a horse? Those incisors aren't exactly nothing. I promise you, you will feel it if you were ever bit by a horse. And I promise, it won't be the molars that are biting you. It'll be the incisors. But also, what are you talking about? Having sharp incisors doesn't mean anything. We have the molars for all these animals. They're all flat, grindy molars. This is one of those weird things, right? Creationists will tell you, well, sharp teeth doesn't mean it ate meat. Look at this bat. It has sharp teeth and it eats fruit. And it's like, okay, yeah, but it has like some sharp canines. Canines aren't normally used in food processing in mammals. They're usually used for like fights, like intraspecific territorial fights, or like mating dominance displays and things like that. Okay, great. Let's say the same thing about camels. But then you look at the molars. Like, oh yeah, but this bat doesn't have molars designed for eating meat, does it? No, it has molars designed for crushing up like fruits and leaves. Oh, okay. Or you'll say like, oh, this camel, wow, sure does have flat, grindy molars. So it doesn't mean that it eats meat that it has sharp teeth. You need to actually be specific when it comes to mammals and talk about primarily the molars. The molars are what tells you about the diet of an animal. Incisors are just there to nip off bits of food and get it to the molars. Canines, like I said, are primarily defensive or offensive weapons that are not used directly in food processing. It's the molars that tell you what's going on. Now, with a reptile, it's simpler, right? Because all their teeth tend to have about the same shape. They tend to only vary in size. They can vary a little bit in shape, but not much. It's called homeodont dentition. Or no, homodont dentition? Whatever, I don't remember if there's an E in there. Whereas mammals have heterodont dentition. Means you have to pay more attention. Anyway, here we go.
This little bitty animal has 18 pairs of ribs.
Okay.
The next one in his series has only 15 pairs of ribs.
Okay.
Now, what would cause an animal to lose? See, when you lose a complete set of ribs, you also lose the backbone that they attach to.
That's true. Oh, we'll take a drink. Yeah, we'll take a drink.
Good job, Kent. You got something right.
You'd have to change the nerve system.
Nope. You don't.
You have to change the muscular system.
Nope.
You have to change the blood, the circulatory system.
Nope. Let's take a drink. And I'll tell you how I know that.
Sure you can.
That I am thinking of 3 species that are commonly encountered by humans that have variable rib counts. Where you can find 2 members of the same species, and they might have different numbers of ribs, and they manage to get along just fine. One of them is Equus caballus. You might be familiar with as a horse.
Okay.
Modern horses vary in rib count. Not all horses have the same number of ribs. Another one...
I did not know that.
Yeah. Another one is Sus scofra, the pig, which has actually been artificially bred by humans to have some breeds with multiple extra ribs. You know why? Because pig ribs are delicious. And if you can get more of them, that's great. But here's another species. Now, normally this species has a pretty consistent rib count, but occasionally you get an individual that has 1 less rib. It's Homo sapiens. Kent's own species has a variable rib count. So I don't know why it's supposed to be some kind of barrier to evolution that rib counts in fossil equids varies. Whatever. I don't care. Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $1.99 says, it's a moot as nothing ate meat before the flood. Yes. Obviously. And My Unfinished Journey for $5 says, Kent Hovind, well, it's just theoretical. Me. So it has supporting evidence? Yeah, that's another good point. Theoretical in science means something very different than it does in normal parlance. All right, here we go.
It's a major change. If I wanted you to change...
It's really not that major of a change. So let me explain why it doesn't actually have to change. Like fundamentally, what's happening with the circulatory or the musculature or the nervous system, right? And then Alex Markle, who's been a member for 60 months, is at the annual level, says, wait, are you telling me that my baby back ribs didn't come from a baby? Sorry. I am telling you that, yes. I know. Disappointing. Thought you were getting one over on those stupid crying babies. Turns out, no. Oh, right. So the way embryology works, right, is that the muscular system, the nerves, the blood vessels, they all create attachment points and grow towards different things on the basis of chemical gradients, right? There are chemical gradients that tell your nerves as you're developing as an embryo, hey, I need innervation here. And so your nerves grow out in a predictable pattern to innervate those areas. Similarly with circulation. There are chemical signals with a gradient that says, hey, this area needs blood supply. And so cells increasingly turn into blood vessels going in that direction. And when there's a mutation that cuts out, say, a rib or something, it doesn't remove those chemical signals. And so while the exact pattern of innervation and blood supply won't be the same if you lose a rib, it will still get everywhere it needs to. And you might think, well, doesn't exact nerves need to be there in order to control different parts of the body? And the answer is no. Your brain is very plastic. You learn how to control your body. That's why when babies are born, right, they can barely do anything. And they essentially can't move purposefully at all. They just kind of flail. And you might think, well, they grip onto things. But that's an instinctive behavior that doesn't even need to go to the brain, right? That's the same thing as, like, you ever touch a stove and then rapidly pull your hand away before you even feel it burn, and then only later do you actually feel the pain from the burn? That's because that action didn't need to get to your brain. It got to your spine. Your spine did a quick thing, and then later the signal actually got to your brain. The same thing when babies grip things, right? So yeah, none of this requires these big changes. Who's the other guy? We almost did a debate. I know we debated Erica once. What's his name? He's an engineer, did HVAC systems. I don't remember, but that was his big thing, right? Like, oh, if you have a mutation that makes your arm grow longer, you need another mutation to get the muscles to reach, and another mutation to get the nerves all the way down there, and another mutation for the blood vessels. Like, nope, that's not how embryology works.
Your car from running on 4 wheels to running on 3 wheels. What all would you have to change?
But cars don't develop like embryos do, Kent. Cars actually do work from a blueprint, and you have to actually change the specific drawings, right? Embryos work more like an algorithm, where if you give it different inputs, you'll get different outputs, but they'll still be connected to the original pattern that you have got with the original inputs. And we can see this because humans vary in rib count, Kent, and it still works. I'm not aware of anyone who's died as a result of not having the right number of ribs. No, it was not a Tangelo Fearmonger. Someone who I don't dislike nearly as much as Tangelo. But he also just never learns. I have a video on it, like doing so-and-so's research for him or something. Maybe I can find that and that'll tell me who it is, because now it's bugging me. Bill Morgan. That's it. Bill Morgan. Yep. Thanks, YouTube, for keeping track of my videos and letting me search them.
A lot of stuff, right? The braking system, the steering system, the balance of the car. I mean,
if the 2 wheels that go to one are the rear wheel, since most cars steer from the front wheels, you wouldn't have to change the steering system in that case. But whatever.
Major overhaul. And yet they're teaching this stuff, not only that it happened, but that it happened by chance.
I also have to say, going from paired organs to one organ in the center line is a much bigger change than losing one in a set of segmented ribs and vertebrae. That's a much, much bigger change. So this is, even if we accept the cars, which are a bad analogy for life always, even if we accept that analogy, this is still a bad analogy.
It wasn't designed, it just happened. Then the next so-called ancient horse had 19 pairs of ribs.
Okay.
So now you have another major serious problem.
The thing is, I don't actually know that he's right about these rib counts. I just don't care because I don't see how they're a problem.
How are you going to get all this new nervous system, new muscular system? How's this animal going to survive? What about coordination?
What about coordination? This is one of those things that drives me crazy. It's like, we live in a world where variable rib counts are just routine among existing species. And horses with fewer or more ribs don't suddenly just stumble and fall over because they're uncoordinated. What? I don't know how he comes up with this. Because there had to be a thought process, right? And it might not have even been his, right? Maybe he just got it from someone else. But someone came up with this idea that animals that have one fewer rib than normal will have problems with coordination and muscle attachment and innervation and whatnot.
It seems so absurd.
It is absurd, you're right. But, like, who came up with that, and why did they come up with it? And I'm curious, because I don't understand the thought process. And that's one of the reasons that I watch creationist stuff, even stuff that I don't do videos on. Because I want to understand how people come to these conclusions. And it's hard to do, because these conclusions are so bonkers. And sometimes I can just chalk it up to, like, wishful thinking, motivated reasoning, confirmation bias, and whatnot. But I don't know if that's the case here.
What about reproduction? Who's this 19-paired rib horse gonna mate with?
An 18-pair horse, because, that's how it works now. It's not a big deal. Species have variable rib counts today, Kent, and they just mate with another member of the species, and then the resulting offspring have a certain number of vertebrae, which is determined in ways that, I mean, I don't know the actual underlying genetic mechanisms, but, you know, they get a number of vertebrae. Yeah, they have a rib count. Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, as Dapper's Pelagic PhD says, even humans have variation in the number of vertebrae. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, it's just...
You got to have a male and a female evolve at the same time.
No! Just take a drink. Hey, guys. If you have an opposite sex partner, and you're both fertile, but you have different rib counts, it'll be fine. You can still have babies. Don't worry. And if that's not your situation, that's also okay. But you might have trouble having babies with your partner if they're not a fertile partner of the opposite sex. So, you know, there's always adoption. Oh, it's a gigantic hassle. On the one hand, I'm like, yeah, we should be really careful with who gets kids, because, man, that could be setting kids into a horrible, horrible situation if we're not careful. But on the other hand, like, should it really, like, cost that much and have years of waiting while we have a backlog of kids waiting to be adopted and a backlog of people who want to adopt kids? I don't know. I actually don't know. But I know that I don't think the system as it is really doing a great job. And you might say, well, how are you going to say that if you can't say how you fix it? It's like, I don't know. I'm not a pilot. I wouldn't presume to tell a pilot how to do his job. But I know that if we're flying straight towards a mountain, he's probably doing a bad job. In the same place. It's a big world, you know. It doesn't matter if they're in the same place or not. You don't need to have them both evolve at all. And they got to find each other. Nope, they don't. You have a real serious problem. Now, I don't care if somebody wants to believe this, but that's not science. Can you believe it? You don't know it, but you believe it, because if you don't, then you have to think that certain humans are incompatible with other humans reproductively because of rib count. But they're not. That's not a cause of fertility problems. No one's off to the fertility clinic and they're like, oh, I so want a kid, but my husband, he's got too many ribs. What are we going to do? Like, no, not a thing. Dr. Tapioca Weasel just gets into membership and it went to David Smith. So we'll take a drink for that. Thank you very much. Yes, that's religion. Then it goes back to 18 pairs of ribs for the modern horse today. Okay. Except that's the typical number. Horses vary. So, it's just baloney. But it's every textbook I've... You know, I think it's only baloney in France, where they eat horse meat commonly. Seen in countries around the world. Here's a textbook from Ireland telling the kids we've got evidence from evolution. The problem is, this whole thing was proven... I like that the citation is just... Irish textbook, page 259, because there's only one textbook in Ireland, and it's the Irish textbook. Oh my gosh. I'm taking a drink for that citation. Irish textbook, page 259. Go look it up. That is an amazing citation. Irish textbook. Jeez. Been wrong in 1950. Now, it never was true, but back in 1950... Oh, and there's Dr. Tapioca Weasel with another gifted membership. Thank you so much. Thanks. And that went to James Hall. Take a drink. A major evolutionist named G.G. Simpson said, hey, folks, it's not true. Did he say that? I would love to see some kind of citation. Anybody that studies horses will tell you there's a large variety of horses alive right now. Okay, but are any of them small three-toed horses, Kent? No? You mean there's morphologies present in the fossil record that aren't present now and that are closer to the basal morphology of very early paracerdactyls that we see in the fossil record, such that the earliest tapiromorphs and the earliest equids are virtually indistinguishable? Wow, and how today the one-toed condition is prominent in equids, but it's not prominent in the other paracerdactyl groups that exist, like rhinos and tapirs, and it also wasn't common in, say, calicotheres, another group of paracerdactyls. Goop23 for $5 says, Irish textbook versus KJV, get title, choose your fighter. DM Original Institute Academic Excavation Wing for $2 says, to be frank, that might be better than KJV get title. I mean, yeah. And then Dr. Tapioca Weasel with another membership comes in, and it goes to Matai Milesevich is what I'm going to go with. And I hope that's right. And if it's not, I'm sincerely sorry. Please let me know. All right, here we go.
And the horse and the zebra and the mule can all be interbred.
But they can't produce fertile offspring. So they're still different species. And the thing is that Kent knows of groups where they can't interbreed, but he still thinks they're probably single kind, right? So Kent is willing to allow for speciation to the point of reproductive isolation. Which means that it doesn't really matter if they can interbreed or not. Plus, I mean, yeah, all modern equids share a much more recent common ancestor than, say, Eohippus. No one thinks that, like, donkeys and zebras and horses evolved completely separately from Eohippus in lineages that happen to only convergently arrive on the one-toed condition. That's not anyone's supposition. That's the only reason you should be surprised by limited interfertility between those groups, is if you think that that's what happened, but no one does. Robert Madewell, who's been a member for 37 months, thank you so much, says, does the Irish textbook have an entire chapter on the evolution of clovers? They have a chapter on the evolution of clovers, on the evolution of harps. Harps are very important. And also, there's a little side text box all about, like, rainbows and leprechauns and pots of gold, right there. And then later on, you hear about the evolution of Saccharomyces cerevisiae, because that is the most important fungus in the world, including to the Irish. That is brewer's yeast. Thank you, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. You are an important part of human civilization. For one thing, it's a big part of keeping water from going bad on long sea voyages. Like, you know, the whole IPA, Imperial Pale Ale? Yeah, that was invented so that beer could survive the trip all the way to India from England. So that people could, you know, both get beer in in India, and also have something to drink on the trip that wasn't going to go bad. Because if you try to bring fresh water on a trip, on a sailing vessel from England to India, guess what? It's going to go bad.
A lady just wrote me a letter and sent me a bunch of pictures of her Zorse. She says, I have a zebra stallion, and I have a zebra mare, and I have a mule stallion and a mule mare. And
well, you can't breed mule stallions. There have been, I think, like less than 5 reports of fertile mule mares. So, I mean, I guess maybe that's something. Dr. Tapioca Weasel gifted another membership, and it went to Redmond17. Thank you very much. We'll take a drink.
And I have horses, and she said, I crossbreed all of them every which way.
Well, not those mules, but okay.
She said I got pictures about that. She said if the male is the zebra, then it's called a zorse. If the male is the horse and the female is a zebra, then they got another name for it or something like that.
Is it Hebrew? By the way, in case you guys don't know, generally when you're coming up in English with a portmanteau for 2 different species that you have a hybrid of, you take the first part of the name from the species that is the sire, and you take the second part of the name from the species that is the dam, or father and mother. So, yeah, there you go. That's how it normally works. That's why it's tiger and lion to make a tigon if the tiger is male and the female is a lion. But you get a liger if the male is a lion and the female is a tiger. And unlike ligers, tigons are relatively small. All right, so I do not. Is this Irish? I don't know how to read Irish. Sorry, it's like Ismalapane AIG. I mean, I know we're going for.
That was good to me.
Penne? I don't know. It's an AIG's a bag of dicks joke. I'm taking a drink. And it says, the Irish textbook, page 69. Nice. And there's Dr. Tapioca Weasel gifting another membership to the Dapper Dinosaur channel. And that went to, give me one second, Mark Von Wilsco. Thank you very much. Here we go.
They cross ponies and zebras and get a Zioni. There's several websites about this competition. Who can produce the best Zioni and who can produce the best...
Oh, and I didn't realize, but that was Old Man Writer of the Irish Textbook. which I'm pretty sure wasn't their name originally, but that is their first super chat, so thank you very much. The Irish textbook, jeez.
Zorse and all this kind of stuff. Back in this biology textbook, they said the other examples, including the much repeated gradual evolution of the modern horse, has not held up under close examination.
Okay. So first of all, this isn't from a textbook. Or, I don't think it is. Biology of the University of Life. Pretty sure that's just like a lay-level book that's not for use in school. But anyway, I happen to have looked into this quote. And specifically what's being complained about is that there is no evidence of an orthogenetic sequence in horses, which is true. So what's orthogenetic? What does that word mean? It's not a common word that we use. So this was an idea about evolution that was prominent in like the early parts of the 20th century, like before the 1940s. We're talking like in like the 20s and 30s. And the idea was that sometimes a lineage of organisms just got on like a trajectory in evolution, and it was almost like they had an evolutionary momentum, right? So one of the ideas was there are these mammals called titanotheres. They're extinct now. And one of the ideas for their extinction is that people thought, well, maybe they just got too big and their head ornamentation got so ridiculous because they were just on this evolutionary trajectory where they get bigger and bigger, and proportionally their head ornamentation got bigger and bigger too. And eventually it was just maladaptive and they went extinct. Well, okay. Maybe. But then we looked closer at the fossil record, and it turns out there is actually no consistent size trajectory, and this, variation in head ornamentation went all over the place with these titanotheres. So the evidence on the ground just didn't match up. And then, as we learn more and more about things like natural selection, we realize, well, you really can't have a momentum that builds up to the point of maladaptiveness that then just barrels forward anyway. There's no mechanism genetically that would cause that. And so that idea was abandoned, but because it was such a popular idea, many of the earliest fossil transitional sequences that we have, like those of the horse, and even in some cases human evolution, were presented as if it was just a straight shot from the ancestor to the modern organism, without the variations that were existing, the different organisms that were, getting smaller instead of bigger, or not losing toes instead of losing toes. And there's Dr. Tapioca Weasel, who's gets into membership, and it went to that guy. Thank you very much. We will take a drink. I feel like Dr. Tapioca Weasel is trying to get some particular person that gets a membership, and it's not working. The real solution, Dr. Tapioca Weasel, is to give 50 memberships. And that way, it'll almost certainly get to that person. And I'll finish this beer and go get another one.
Can't refute that logic.
What are they saying here? In other words, it's not true.
No, that's not what they're saying. What they're saying specifically, in a fuller version that you're just cherry-picking from, Kent, is that the orthogenetic evolution of the horse is not an accurate depiction of the evolution of Equidae, which is true. But it's different from saying that the transitional sequence that we have from the earliest horses, characterized by Hyracotherium, all the way through to later horses, like Equus, is invalid. That is not what they're saying. That is a real thing that is happening in the fossils. It's just more complicated than this evolves into this, into this, into this, and now we have horses.
All right. 1950, G.G. Simpson, George Gaylord Simpson.
I feel like it was Simpson, not Shimshon, but what do I know?
Simpson, who was a strong believer and a proponent of evolution, he wrote an article in Scientific Monthly, 1950, October, that said many examples commonly cited, such as the evolution of the horse family or of saber-toothed tigers, can be readily shown to have been unintentionally falsified.
Hey, Ben, what are those next, 6 words there?
And not to be really orthogenetic.
What's that last word again?
Orthogenetic. It means something.
It's like that thing I was just talking about. Like the whole time. Wow. Thanks, Kent. Thanks for confirming that I was right. Alexander Dankert just gifted a Dapper Dinosaur membership, and it went to Alt Boglims with a Z at the end. Thank you very much, Alexander Dankert. I think that's your first time gifting membership on the channel, so I do appreciate that. I'll take a drink.
In other words, it's not true.
It's not true that it's orthogenetic, Kent. Orthogenetic. What do you think Kent knows that? What am I asking for? Of course, Kent doesn't know what orthogenetic means. There's absolutely no way he knows what that means. This is a man who doesn't know what the word dinosaur means. He knows what orthogenetic means. And if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say he doesn't know what the word dinosaur means, I encourage you to go watch my debate with him. It's like one of the top videos on my channel.
Yeah.
And also that clip that I use, the audio clip that I use, where I'm like, hey, if you found a dinosaur, how would you, or a skeleton, how would you identify as a dinosaur, you personally? And then he's like, well, I don't know. I would have to look into that. I've never really thought about it. Yeah, that's from that debate. Because that question was a disguised question to ask Kent, hey, Kent, what's a dinosaur? And his answer was, I don't know. I've never really thought about it. Yep.
I've never considered the question before.
Yeah, he never even thought to think, what's a dinosaur? Dr. Dino has just didn't occur to him that maybe he should know what a dinosaur is.
It was falsified. It's been proven to be incorrect. So here's the problems with the horse evolution. This would be a good quiz question. How do we know this is, or what's the problems with this teaching? It was made up by Othniel Marsh in 1874.
That darn Marsh. Apparently that's a reason it's false, is because Marsh came up with it. Okay.
From fossils scattered all over the world.
Well, I mean, North America, but sure, Kent, the world. Heather Cursorial Angiosperm Coon for $4.99 says, did Kent somehow miss that? I'm actually of the opinion that he does not know that.
Now, if you were going to take this to a court of law and say, I have proof for evolution because of this horse series, any freshman law
I wouldn't use proof, but okay.
Student would say, Your Honor, he didn't even find these in the same place.
And then the opposing counsel would point out that ancestors and descendants don't have to live or die in the same place. Therefore, that objection should be
Overruled.
Which, I mean, it would be. In fact, wasn't there a time in, like, the Dover area school district where some person named Kitts Miller sued the school, and then it came down to essentially, is creationism scientific enough to be taught if you just don't talk about God? And it turned out that the answer was no, and creationism, in fact, did lose in school, in a court of law. I think that is a thing that happened. Yeah, I think they called it Kitts Miller v. Dover, which you might have gotten from the fact that the parties were the Dover school district and someone named Kitts Miller.
He certainly didn't find them in the same order.
I mean, like I said, there was overlap, but like the latest Arachotherium is older than the youngest Equus, and overall, you do see a temporal situation where, as you go from smaller to larger and 4-toed or 5-toed to 1-toed, the fossils do get younger. You do go up the column. Now, there is overlap, right? But that's what we expect. Of course there's overlap. Humans overlap currently with ape species that have much more basal methods of locomotion. So what? Seahorses, which have, like prehensile tails and swim by using their dorsal fin undulations, they also coexist with other Signathiformes that use their tail for propulsion, or ones that use the dorsal fin for propulsion but don't have prehensile tails. Like we have an entire transitional sequence for seahorses from trumpetfish that are all alive today. The whole sequence is still alive because there's overlap. When a new form evolves, it does not force the old forms to go extinct. They can live in different places or have different niches. That's fine. That's why we have things like trumpetfish and pipefish and sea dragons and seahorses, which is going all the way from the trumpetfish, which is basically just a fish with a weird mouth, down to the pipefish, which is long and skinny and looks a whole lot more like a seahorse, to the sea dragon, which doesn't have the prehensile tail, but does tend to use its dorsal fin for propulsion, all the way down to that prehensile-tailed seahorse with its weird anatomy of nonsense. Seahorses are chaos, is what I'm saying.
And even finding fossils in order doesn't prove anything.
I mean, it's a confirmed prediction, which does mean something. Is it conclusive proof on its own? No. But that's not how science works. Science doesn't wait for absolute proof and then say, aha, now we have it. Because first of all, absolute proof is never coming in science. And second, science is about probabilities and confirmed predictions. If you can consistently have your predictions come true on the basis of your hypothesis, every time that happens, it increases our confidence in that hypothesis. So if the hypothesis is horses evolved from basal parasodactyls that were five-fingered and small, then getting these in order would be a confirmation of predictions you could make from that.
See, the whole problem...
Oh, My Infinite Journey for $5 says, does Kent think Kitts and Miller are two different people? Probably. That would be balancing out his conflating Yuri Miller. Yeah, he did seem to think that Yuri Miller was the name of a guy, instead of being, Yuri and Miller, the two different people came up with and conducted the Yuri Miller experiment. Yeah, I don't know. He probably does think that Kitts and Miller are two people. The thing is, we could just call him. He gives out his number all the time. It's not even doxing. His number is 1-800-BIG-DINO, or is it 1-888-BIG-DINO?
Isn't it like 855 or something?
Oh, no, it is 855-BIG-DINO. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. 855-BIG-DINO. I think it's extension 4 gets you to Kent. So,
That's right.
You could just ask him. Don't right now, though. It's like 10 o'clock out there. Actually, it's coming up on 11. He won't answer right now. And even if he did, that feels like harassing. Wait till it's like, like 2 or 3 p.m. Eastern time. Then, if you really need to call Kent. But don't call him late at night. That's just mean.
The problem is, evolution does not have to be proven in a court of law.
You're right. It has to be proven under much more stringent rules. Those are the scientific community. Remember, in a court of law, in a lawsuit, which is what usually happens, no one's going to put, evolution on criminal trial. In a lawsuit, the evidentiary standard is the preponderance of evidence, which basically means, is it more likely that this happened than that it didn't happen? Well, then you find that it happened, right? That's why, say, the 45th president, we can't say he's a R-wordist in the criminal sense, but we can say he was held legally liable for something that in common parlance is covered by the R-word. So, he's not convicted, but, liable, adjudicated. On the other hand, in science, usually you need to have p-values that indicate much more like, 99.95% likelihood that whatever you're looking at is a result of your hypothesis being true, as opposed to just chance. It's a much higher standard of evidence in science than it is in court of law. Now, does that mean that nothing that's false ever gets by peer review? No, of course it doesn't mean that. People make mistakes. Sometimes you do get those weird flukes. But yeah. Okay, so Fearmonger makes a point. I mean, harassing him over the phone is mean, but I don't think it's more mean than body slamming your wife. That's true. However, Kent's poor behavior does not justify your poor behavior. That's an important thing to keep in mind. The fact that Kent...
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Right. The fact that Kent is an evil prick doesn't mean that you should behave badly.
It only has to be made believable for the students to fall for it. And they do by the millions, okay? Russian scientists found modern horses in layers lower than the so-called ancient horse. Now, here's how evolution is supposed to work. They say we've got these...
What is this? Chrysilin U and V or Ovcharov, a horse from the dinosaur epoch? Question mark. Moskovskaya Pravda. Okay, so 1980. Okay, so this is from Pravda. I don't know if you know this, but Pravda is a Soviet Union propaganda outlet that had a tendency to publish satirical articles about ridiculous Western paleontology things in order to discredit Western science. Because remember, the Soviet Union wasn't super big on evolution. So, Kent is just taking a translation from a Soviet propaganda outlet known to post satirical articles about paleontology as if it were just true. It's not technically a Trojan source, but it's extremely dumb, and I'm going to drink for it.
Different layers of rock, and each one is a different age, and it all means something. Now, we covered earlier in seminar part CSE 102, those...
Yeah, Alex Markle says, wait, are you saying he bit the onion? Yeah, basically. Pravda, it's not exactly the same as the Onion, because a lot of what they published was actually just straight up non-satirical, but propaganda, because, I mean, it, again, was published directly by the Soviet Union. It like was an independent source. And only some of their content was intentionally satirical. But yeah, this was a satirical article, along with numerous other ones. There was a satirical article that talked about a concretion that was vaguely footprint-shaped, and pretended that, oh, maybe it was just an alien walking on the seashore, because they thought the idea that it was... Yeah, basically. They thought that the idea of evolution was ridiculous, so they printed this satirical article about a concretion that some creationists then used as a source to say that concretion was actually a footprint. Kent is one of those creationists who uses that Pravda article as a source.
Layers don't mean anything. They're not different ages, but use your typical textbook, have a cross-section showing the different layers of the Earth, and they'll say this one is real old down here, and this one is the newest one on top.
I mean, yeah, think about it like a parfait, right? If you want to have a bottom layer of, say, like, strawberries, and then you want to have a layer of, say, I don't know, cream, and you want to have a layer of blueberries, then a layer of cream, and then a layer of granola, right? From bottom to top. Which one do you have to put in first if you want strawberries at the bottom, Bent? Your parfait.
Strawberries.
Okay, and then if I want a cream layer on top of that, do I put the blueberries next and then try to shove the cream under the blueberries?
You could, but that probably isn't the best idea.
No, we'll probably just mix them up, right? Instead, I should probably lay the cream down next and then the blueberries. Yeah, it's almost like that's how things go when you stack them. You lay things on top of each other. The oldest has to be at the bottom. It's just basic logic. Mark Rose for $1.99 says, ironic how given he supposedly hates communism. Yeah, that is the thing, right? Kent is on record as being pretty anti-communist. And while I'm not going to go into a whole big thing about communism, I will say it is ironic that he, more than once, has favorably cited Pravda, which I would say right now is most famous for being a nonsense Soviet Union propaganda rag. I mean, I know it's still technically an operation, but it's still mostly just a propaganda rag now for Putin. But oh wait, I missed one. Let's see. Yeah, Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $4.99 says, today Kent would cite the Epoch Times instead of Pravda. Yeah, that's probably true. The Epoch Times, for those of you who don't know, is a right-wing propaganda outlet run by Falun Gong, which is an anti-communist political cult. Well, politico-religious cult from China. And while I'm not going to say that I disagree with them, that the Chinese Communist Party are terrible and ought to not be in power, let's just say, I'm not going to get too far into it, but there's a whole lot of other culty and racisty and not great stuff that Falun Gong is going for. They're also the ones who put on Shen Yun. If you've ever seen the commercials or the flyers for Shen Yun, it's usually called like Shen Yun, China Before Communism. That is like a fundraising and propaganda outlet for Falun Gong. Let's see. Then Mark Rosa read that. And then Tapioca Weasel. Dr. Tapioca Weasel gifted a membership, and it went to Christian Ganelius. Thank you very much, Dr. Tapioca Weasel. All right, here we go. I did not think Falun Gong was going to come up this much. By this much, I mean at all.
So, according to the theory, you should find modern horses up here, ancient horses down here, and it all sounds really good, but they don't find them in that order. They find what they call a so-called ancient horse, the Hirasotherum. Let's put an H right here for Hirasotherum, or for horse. Then they find a modern horse under it.
No, I am not aware of any finds of modern equus below layers that contain Hyracotherium. That's just flat out a lie.
Yeah.
Rosina Apophenia Sufferer Keller for $4.99 says, Epoch Times CFO Bill Guan is charged in an alleged $67 million global money laundering scheme. Yeah, that is also a new thing. That just happened, I think that just happened like this week, or was it over the weekend? It was really recent. And yeah, so it turns out that yeah, they were laundering all sorts of money. I don't think the Epoch Times is going to go away as a source. It's also become really, really much more popular than it used to be. Like, it now is okay. So one thing is they like to inflate their readership numbers, right? They like to pretend that anyone who has clicked on a link to a Epoch Times article is an Epoch Times reader, even if you just did it once. But still, they have a really wide readership. There's a number of politicians who have that on their like list of preferred news sources. It's kind of odd. I don't really get it. And again, I spent a lot of time reading the Epoch Times, so I probably wouldn't get it. But yeah, it's very weird things. Very weird.
It wouldn't be directly under it, but it would be in the layer of rock that is under it, maybe someplace else, okay?
Oh, so it is okay for them to not be in the same place. Got it, Kent. Thanks for contradicting yourself.
Obviously, buried in that same layer, though. So if modern horses are already on the scene,
which they weren't,
before the ancient horse is around, how can this be the ancestor of this?
Because the basal anatomy can persist after the evolution of the more derived anatomy. That's how. Because even if this were the case, it still wouldn't actually disprove evolution. Wouldn't even really be a problem. I mean, it happens to not be the case. But, yeah. It's as simple as basal anatomy. Organisms with the basal anatomy do not have to go extinct because organisms with the more derived anatomy evolved. It's that simple. Like we said, there are still trumpet fish, even though we have seahorses.
It can't be true. And it just can't be.
Great argument, Kent. I'll just take a drink.
It just can't be true.
The little Hyracotherium is not even a horse. It's just exactly like the Hyrax, little rock badger, I believe.
No, I don't even know where to start. Okay, we'll take a drink. Okay. Differences between Hyracotherium and an actual Hyrax. Going fairly quickly. Hyracotherium has a different foot structure from the Hyrax. It has a very different nasal bone. It has different dentition in both tooth count and just where they're arranged. The Hyrax, for one thing, has canines, whereas the Hyracotherium doesn't. The Hyracotherium has like 2 or 3 floating ribs, if I remember correctly. The Hyracotherium has the Hyrax has like 18 or something. It's like it's made out of floating ribs. They have entirely different pelvises. I mean, the Hyracotherium has a much, much shorter tail than the Hyrax, at least if I remember correctly. These are not alike at all, is basically what I'm saying. The only way in which they're similar is that they're both kind of similar in size-ish, and they have a similar name. Now, Hyracotherium was named after the Hyrax, but not for any particularly good reason. They're not at all the same.
They're still running around today in the country of Turkey and in East Africa.
I mean, they are still running around. I don't know about Turkey, but I also don't know that they're not. But yeah, I mean, there are Hyraxes, just they're very little like Hyracotherium. This is just Kent never having looked at their skeletons.
So if they're still alive, then it's certainly not the ancestor.
Also still not true. Even if Hyracotherium were alive today, that does not mean that a modern Hyracotherium would not represent the basal anatomy of equids from which is derived the modern equus. Because again, the basal members of a lineage do not have to go extinct in order for more derived members of the lineage to exist. That is not how evolution works. It's never how evolution has been proposed to work. If a basal member of a group remains well adapted to its particular environment, even though other members of that group go on to become more derived in new environments, and even if they then later come to have range crossover, that is in no way a problem for evolution. Evolution doesn't require that certain organisms go extinct when new organisms evolve. That's not part of the theory of evolution. Now, it is true that certain organisms just do go extinct across the history of life, right? That's just a fact of life, but that's not a requirement of evolution. It's just something that happens.
Couldn't prove any evolution from the little bitty Hyracotherium. Fourthly, the number of ribs are different. The number
We already covered that, Kent. Why are you going back over it?
of toes are different. And
Yeah, that's the point. The point is the toe difference. Taking a drink. That's the whole point, Kent. The number of toes is the whole point. We're showing the pentadactyl hand is basal in mammals. That's why you have 5 fingers. It's why your dog has 5 toes. It's why every monkey, except for a few that lost their thumb, has 5 fingers. It's why you've got 5 fingers inside of a damn wheel flipper. So why does the horse only have 1 toe? Digit loss. DM Original Institute Academic Excavation Wing for $2 says, belated communism is a red herring. Sorry, communism is a red herring. There we go. I got it out. Oh, awesome. All right, here we go.
And the teeth are very different.
Actually, the teeth are one of the most conserved parts of the equid family line. It seems like grazing behavior developed really early on, like with the split between Tapiromorpha and Equidae. Tapiromorpha, for those of you who aren't aware, is just the group that contains tapirs and rhinoceros. Tapirs are more closely related to rhinoceros and vice versa than either is to horses. So, there you go.
The little Hyracotherium has sharp-pointed teeth. The horse today has a flat chewing tooth for grinding, grasses.
Except that the horses also have sharp teeth. They're just incisors, just like they were with Hyracotherium. Like, I don't... Where... Is he getting this from somewhere?
I don't know, maybe.
That's what it eats. They're not related to each other. Fifthly, down in South America, when they find the fossils, the 3-toed horses are on top, the 1-toed horses are on the bottom.
Okay, let's take a drink. I'm going to try and calm down a little bit. We're going to wrap it up. I just realized we're a bit over time. Have we dropped an F-bomb?
Not yet.
Those aren't fucking horses, Kent! That group of nodo ungulates that I mentioned before that went extinct right after the land bridge between North and South America hit, those aren't even artiodactyls. Or sorry, parasidactyls. So, those are nodo ungulates that happen to have a one-toed group, a small group of these one-toed organisms. They're not even horses. And also, in case you're curious, yeah, since only one species ever seems to have had the one-toed morphology among this group of animals, there's a lot of 3- and 4-toed organisms in Nodoungulata that persist through the fossil record. But guess what? We still have more basal members of that group that have more toes. Regios just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships.
Nice.
They went to Donnie Hanby, Monkey Man, Ian Thomas, Southern Sal, SHGH, and Kicker Lion. Or sorry, Kicker White Lion. I entirely missed an entire word in there, I guess. Alright, here we go. 5 drinks and then we're going to get out of here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here we go. Okay, so let's take a look at what's coming up on the channel. On Thursday, we have the Scorpzilla Attacks video, which is the part 2 to Roger thinking that volcanoes are the anuses of living creatures. It's going to tell us all about Scorpzilla, whose anuses, I guess, anusi, I don't know, are basically several volcanoes in Alaska. So, yeah. That's going to be on Thursday. Then on Saturday, I'm going to be continuing looking at that old talk from David Menton from about a decade ago. Then the next Tuesday is going to be Kent with Bent number 139, which is already scheduled. And it definitely has a name, and I definitely remember it. And I'm not currently clicking through my channel dashboard to find it, because I already know that it's Amok Kent, a riff on Amok Time, the classic TOS episode in which turns out that Spock has a secret fiancée that no one knew about, even though in Strange New Worlds, everyone knows about her because she's been on the Enterprise. And they also switched minds that one time. But that's just more evidence for me that Strange New World takes place in a slightly different timeline. But it's still a fun show, and I still enjoy it. So yeah, there you go. And then that's about a week out, so I think that covers it. And I do not believe, Bent, that you are currently in danger of getting or being forced to wear a tutu, because we made it to 74%. But I do want to show this off. Look at this. This isn't just a static thing. I can move around. How neat is that?
Nice.
It's pretty sweet. Anyway. Oh, yeah. Tricera Strawberry Polyploidy Forever says, also Strange New World to Pring is amazing. Yeah, you will get no argument from me. Big fan of Strange New Worlds to Pring. I mean, honestly, I'm a big fan of Strange New Worlds overall. For one thing, I never thought I would like a Star Trek musical, and yet I like the Star Trek musical. So, all right, everybody. We are not doing Power Rangers tonight. Sorry about that, but just not tonight. I believe we will probably be doing it on Saturday. You know, atheismo willing, Darwin willing, God willing, whatever higher power that you might pray to willing. With that, though, we'll talk to you later. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and I hope to see you all on Thursday. Bye, everybody. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Thoravara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Eleron Teller, Horseflesh, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostek Van Manen, Landed Noel, Mabdy Babdy, Sphincter of Doom, Lawless, John Ackerman, and Strawberry Vein. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.